The X-Men are irrelevant, a tired trope in a world that's moved on, or so some say. But the fall of Krakoa has birthed a new team, raw, powerful, and unburdened by past failures. This is Cyclops' new guard, a volatile mix of young mutants like the fiery Temper, the enigmatic Rasputin 4, and the rebellious Kid Omega. They're not just heroes, they're complex individuals grappling with trauma while fighting for a future they might not live to see. Forget Xavier's dream, this is a new era, and these are the X-Men to watch. Let's delve deeper into the heart of the inferno that is Temper. Idea Konko, formerly Oya, is not just a mutant with the power to manipulate temperature. She's a walking testament to the destructive potential that lies within even the most well-intentioned. Her thermokinesis isn't a neatly controlled gift, it's a raging firestorm that once consumed her, leading to a tragedy that resulted in her exile from the mutant nation of Krakoa. Imagine carrying that weight, the constant gnawing fear that the very power meant to protect could erupt in devastation. Temper's journey is a tightrope walk between control and chaos, a desperate bid for redemption as she grapples with the guilt and trauma of her past. Cyclops sees her potential, the chance to forge her destructive abilities into a force for good, a weapon against the very prejudice that fuels her inner turmoil. But the question remains, can Temper truly tame the fire within, or will the shadows of her past consume her once more, turning her into the very weapon she fears becoming? Her story is a powder keg, and her every move is one step closer to either salvation or detonation. Glob Herman is an open book, quite literally. Robert Herman's mutation has rendered him a living paradox, a being of incredible durability encased in a fragile-looking, transparent wax-like skin that exposes his very being to the world. This stark visual metaphor speaks volumes about the mutant experience, the vulnerability that comes with being different, the feeling of being constantly under scrutiny. Glob has endured prejudice, not just from the outside world, but from within his own family, a heartbreaking reminder of the intolerance that can fester even in the most intimate circles. His journey has been a winding path of self-discovery, from the rebellious ranks of the Omega gang, fueled by youthful anger and a sense of belonging, to the quiet solitude of organic farming, a testament to his desire for peace and growth. His return to the X-Men fold isn't just a comeback, it's a statement, a declaration of his commitment to the mutant dream, his willingness to use his unique physiology for something greater than himself. But the question lingers, can this gentle giant, whose very form suggests malleability, withstand the pressures of a world that demands conformity, or will he be molded by the forces that seek to define him? Kid Omega, Quintavious Squire, is the embodiment of controlled chaos, a walking, talking wildcard in the X-Men's already volatile deck. He's an Omega-level telepath, a psychic powerhouse whose abilities rival those of the legendary Professor X himself. But immense power often breeds immense instability, and Kid Omega is no exception. He's a rebel, a provocateur, a genius with a deeply troubled past, and a disdain for authority that borders on pathological. His very presence is a challenge to the established order, a constant reminder of the untamed potential that lies within the mutant race. His history with the Omega Gang, a group of rebellious students who sought to upend the status quo, speaks volumes about his character, a young man wrestling with his inner demons, lashing out at a world he feels has wronged him. Cyclops' decision to include him on this new team is a high-stakes gamble, a calculated risk that could either unlock Kid Omega's potential for leadership and growth, or unleash a wave of unpredictable chaos. Will he rise to the occasion and become the hero he could be, or will his rebellious nature and volatile temperament lead him, and perhaps the team, down a path of destruction? Kid Omega's path is a tightrope walk over a chasm of possibilities, and the fate of many may hang in the balance. In a team marked by internal struggles and shadowed pasts, Ms. Marvel, Kamala Khan, arrives like a breath of fresh air, a vibrant splash of color in a world often painted in shades of gray. This teenage Inhuman, recently revealed to also be a mutant, is a symbol of hope and unity in a fractured landscape. Her polymorph abilities, the power to stretch, shrink, and embiggen her body, are as versatile and adaptable as her personality. Kamala represents a bridge between worlds, a connection between the inhuman and mutant communities, a testament to the power of embracing one's multifaceted identity. She brings a youthful optimism, a genuine belief in the good of people, and a unique perspective that challenges the cynicism that can often creep into the mutant struggle. But the question remains, can her idealism, her unwavering faith in a brighter future, withstand the harsh realities of a world that often seems determined to extinguish the light? Can Ms. Marvel's optimism survive the crucible of the X-Men's battles, or will the darkness that surrounds them ultimately dim her radiant spirit spirit. Her journey will be a test of resilience, a testament to the power of hope in the face of adversity. Rasputin IV is an enigma, a mystery wrapped in organic metal and imbued with latent magical power. She is a chimera, a being born not of natural processes but of deliberate design, a fusion of the genetic material of two legendary X-Men, Colossus and his sister, the sorceress Magic. This makes her a living, breathing question mark, a testament to the complex and often ethically murky world of genetic manipulation. Her very existence raises profound questions about the legacy of past conflicts and the morality of creating life for a predetermined purpose. Rasputin IV is a blank slate, a character yet to be fully defined, a vessel of immense potential whose purpose remains shrouded in secrecy. Will she be a weapon, a savior, or something else entirely? What role will this artificially created being, carrying the lineage of two powerful and vastly different mutants, play in the future of mutant kind? Her path is unwritten, her destiny unknown, making her a source of both intrigue and apprehension for those who know of her existence. She is a living embodiment of the unknown, a powerful force waiting to be unleashed, for good or for ill. In a team often defined by raw power and volatile emotions, Prodigy, David Allen, stands as the strategic bedrock, the team's ever-calculating mind. His mutant ability is a marvel of intellectual absorption. He can instantly assimilate the knowledge and skills of those around him, making him a walking, talking encyclopedia and a master tactician capable of outmaneuvering almost any opponent. Prodigy embodies the power of learning and adaptation, a crucial asset in a world that throws a relentless barrage of new and unpredictable challenges at mutant kind. His journey from the ranks of the New Mutants to the investigative proving grounds of X Factor has honed his leadership skills, transforming him into a formidable strategist. But the question remains, can Prodigy's formidable intellect truly navigate the turbulent emotional landscape of this new era? Can cold, hard logic and strategy truly address the deeply personal struggles, the traumas, and the simmering resentments that define this particular team dynamic? His ability to process information is unparalleled, but can he process the human element, the unpredictable factor that often throws even the most carefully laid plans into disarray? Prodigy's success, and perhaps the team's, hinges on his ability to bridge the gap between intellect and empathy. Sync, Everett Thomas, is the team's power amplifier. He can synchronize with and duplicate any superhuman ability, making him a force multiplier in battle. His close bond with X-23 adds another layer of strategic depth to the team. Sync represents the power of unity and cooperation, a vital lesson in a world that seeks to divide, but will he get lost in the abilities that are not his own? Finally, X-23, Laura Kinney, a clone of Wolverine, forged in a crucible of pain and violence. She's a warrior with a healing factor, enhanced senses, and adamantium-laced claws, but beneath the hardened exterior lies a soul yearning for connection, for a life beyond the weapon she was designed to be. X-23's journey is one of self-discovery, of breaking free from the chains of her past. She stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, even in the face of unimaginable trauma. Coming in at number 10, Hank McCoy, the brilliant scientist and agile mutant known as Beast, took a leave of absence from the X-Men, though his reasons were different from those of his teammates. After graduating from Xavier's school, Beast pursued a career in genetic research, driven by his insatiable curiosity and his desire to understand the very nature of mutation. He sought to use his intellect to improve the lives of mutants, but his thirst for knowledge, his desire to push the boundaries of science, would eventually lead him down a darker path, one that would bring him back to the X-Men in a very different capacity. Beast's story serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the noblest intentions can be corrupted by ambition and the pursuit of knowledge without ethical boundaries. At number 9, Rogue, the Southern Belle with the power to absorb the powers, memories, and even personalities of others through touch, has also sought refuge from the X-Men. Her power, while formidable, is also a curse. After a traumatic experience where she permanently absorbed Ms. Marvel's powers and memories, Rogue was left adrift, struggling with her own identity and her place within the team. She questioned whether she could ever have a normal life, a normal relationship, free from the fear of accidentally hurting someone she cared about. But Rogue's story is not one of despair. It's a story of resilience. She found support and understanding within the X-Men, particularly from Gambit, and with the help of her fellow mutants and through rigorous training and self-discovery, Rogue eventually learned to control her powers, to embrace her unique abilities, and to forge her own identity as a hero. Taking the number 8 spot, Jean Grey, the powerful telepath and telekinetic whose connection to the Phoenix Force has defined much of her life, has had her own complex relationship with retirement. After sacrificing herself to save the universe from the destructive power of the Dark Phoenix, Jean was eventually resurrected, but the trauma of her experiences, the sheer terror of losing control to the Phoenix's immense power, left deep scars. She sought a life away from the constant battles and the ever-present threat of the Phoenix Force, a life where she could simply be Jean Grey, not a cosmic entity or a superhero. She even retired her codename Marvel Girl, choosing to embrace her own identity, separate from the expectations and burdens that came with being a member of the X-Men. Jean's connection to the Phoenix Force is a powerful metaphor for the burdens of great power and the struggle for control. Flying in at number 7, Archangel. Warren Worthington III, the high-flying mutant with majestic feathered wings, endured a horrific transformation into Archangel, Apocalypse's horseman of death. This traumatic experience left him scarred, both physically and mentally, forcing him to battle his inner darkness as he struggled to reconcile his two personas, the benevolent angel and the ruthless Archangel. His retirement was a period of intense self-reflection and a desperate attempt to regain control of his life. The duality of his nature, the constant struggle between his inherent goodness and the darkness imposed upon him, makes Archangel's journey one of the most compelling in X-Men history. Securing the number 6 position, Colossus. Pyotr Rasputin, the gentle giant with the power to transform his body into organic steel, was a stalwart member of the X-Men for many years, but he also experienced profound loss and betrayal, particularly during the era of the Legacy virus, a deadly disease that targeted mutants. The death of his sister Ileana from the virus deeply affected him, leading him to question his role as a hero and to seek solace in a life away from the constant fighting. Colossus's retirement was a period of mourning, a time for him to grapple with the immense losses he'd suffered and to try to find meaning in a world that seemed determined to take everything from him. Coming in at number 5, Cyclops. Scott Summers. Cyclops, the steadfast leader of the X-Men. Cyclops' relationship with retirement is complicated, to say the least. After the devastating events of the Dark Phoenix saga, a heartbroken Cyclops retired to Alaska, seeking solace and a new beginning. He found love again with Madeline Pryor, and they started a family together. But the world of the X-Men is rarely peaceful. When Jean was revealed to be alive, Cyclops made a controversial decision. He abandoned his wife and newborn child to rejoin the X-Men, drawn back to the life he thought he'd left behind. He later joined X-Factor. This moment highlights a recurring theme in Cyclops' life: the difficult choices he's forced to make as a leader, choices that often come at a high personal cost. Blasting into number 4, Gambit. Remy LeBeau, the charming Cajun thief with the ability to charge objects with explosive kinetic energy, has always been a complex character, walking a fine line between hero and rogue. He even served as Death, one of Apocalypse's horsemen, for a time, a period that forced him to confront his own inner darkness and the destructive potential of his powers. His departures from the X-Men were often driven by his own internal conflicts and his struggle to reconcile his past with his desire to be a hero. Gambit's story is a reminder that even the most charismatic individuals can harbor deep secrets and struggle with their own morality. Phasing in at number 3, Kate Pryde, the phasing mutant whose ability to walk through walls is just one facet of her incredible journey. From the bright-eyed innocent Kitty Pryde to the seasoned battle-hardened Shadowcat and then Captain Kate Pryde, she's been a mainstay of the X-Men for over 40 years. But even Kate had her reasons for stepping away from the team. The Krakoan era was a period of intense moral ambiguity and difficult choices for the X-Men, and Kate was right in the middle of it. She was forced to make decisions that went against her very nature, even resorting to killing in order to protect her people. This trauma took a heavy toll. She longed for the simpler times, the youthful optimism and joy she felt before the weight of leadership and the darkness of war became too heavy a burden to bear. But like a moth to a flame, Kate couldn't stay away from the fight for mutant survival forever. With the fall of Krakoa and the rise of new threats, she's returned to protect her people, this time as a mentor to a new generation of heroes. But her time away wasn't spent idle. In a surprising move, Kate joined the Guardians of the Galaxy and even took on the mantle of Star-Lord, just missing the top spot. At number 2, Cable. Nathan Summers, the time-traveling soldier from a dystopian future, dedicated his life to preventing the horrors he'd witnessed from ever coming to pass. He battled his evil clone, Strife, across time, a conflict that consumed him for years. His retirements were often brief interludes between missions, a chance to regroup and prepare for the next battle in his never-ending war against the forces that threatened to destroy the future. Cable's entire existence is a testament to the enduring struggle against fate and the sacrifices required to protect the future. He is a soldier out of time, a man burdened by the knowledge of what could be, forever fighting to change it. And finally, the moment you've all been waiting for, the #1 retired X-Man is Wolverine, Logan, the best there is at what he does, and what he does isn't very nice. This gruff, ageless Canadian with adamantium claws and a healing factor that just won't quit is practically the poster child for the tormented X-Man. After decades of fighting alongside the X-Men, experiencing more loss and bloodshed than any one person should have to endure, even Wolverine needed a break. The physical toll was immense. Hugh Jackman, who brilliantly portrayed Wolverine in the X-Men movies, even admitted that the physicality of the role was hurting him. But Wolverine's retirement wasn't just about physical exhaustion. It was about the emotional and psychological burden of being a perpetual soldier in a seemingly endless war. He was tired of the cycle of violence, the constant rebuilding and reboots that the X-Men seemed to be trapped in. In the film Logan, a possible future is depicted where a weary older Wolverine has retired from the X-Men, working as a limo driver and caring for an ailing Professor X. But did Wolverine truly find peace in retirement? The answer, as fans well know, is a resounding no. Thanks to Deadpool, Wolverine is set to return to the big screen in Deadpool and Wolverine, and in the comics, he's right back in the thick of it.
The Hellion series has to be one of the most brutal things I've ever read. It was actually painful for me to read. My heart seriously hurt after finishing that series, and I was in tears for honestly most of the last issue. To watch this team of lovable but extremely weird misfits come together over multiple issues throughout this series, only to see many of them slip and self-destruct, was honestly something else. They had found a sense of family, only to lose that newfound family, and with it, for many of them, honestly their sense of hope. It was a brutal ending to what was otherwise honestly an uplifting story. I still can't believe that's how it ended, honestly. Zeb Wells out here just playing with my emotions, playing with my heart. I think the worst character for me in terms of how the story ended for them was honestly Wildchild, who basically decided to just accept that he didn't really belong anywhere and submitted to being in a medicated stupor. It really was tragic. What stories have moved you emotionally? For me, Wildchild's and the Hellions ending overall just literally brought me to tears. I actually struggled to read the pages. That's how much I was crying at the end of this series. It was really heartbreaking and really brutal. This is a traumatic one, or at least it probably was a traumatic one for Wolverine at least. Yep, we're talking about that moment. The moment when Wolverine was permanently separated from his adamantium. What are we talking about here? Divorce, babe. Divorce. Wolverine was divorced basically here from his adamantium, something that initially in the comics was suggested to be part of his mutant power. However, over time, of course, we'd come to learn that the adamantium-coated skeleton that he had, his claws, was not necessarily inherent, but was instead put in place by Weapon X. He did have claws, but they were just bone claws, and then Weapon X basically modified him and coated his whole skeleton in adamantium. When the X-Men faced off against Magneto in space, Magneto used his magnetic mutant powers to manipulate this metallic substance, this adamantium, fully removing it from Wolverine's skeleton. He'd get it back, but the extremely gruesome and painful de-adamantium process would leave its mark, making Wolverine more animalistic soon afterwards. Professor X has a lot of brutal moments in the comics. Honestly, he is tied to many of them because he has done some morally questionable things throughout his comic book history. One of these moments, however, might seem small in comparison to some larger missteps that he's had, but it still shocks me to this day, and I find it honestly quite brutal in a different way, so I'm gonna include it here. We're talking about Professor X admitting his feelings for Jean Grey. This wasn't something that Professor X shared aloud, but just seeing it confessed to, even in a thought bubble, was honestly enough for me. Now granted, at the time, I doubt this would have been as shocking when this comic was released, because it was issue number 3 of X-Men, considering that canon had not yet established that Jean was actually one of the Professor's really first X-Men, who he'd helped when she was only a little kid and he was a young adult. But given the context I had when I read this, yeah, it's a mess. One of the most brutal fights I've seen in a while is the one where Storm faces off against Tarn. Tarn the Uncaring is one of the mutants from Morocco, and he happens to be one of the most upsetting to face. Honestly, because of his mutant powers. Also, he's a mutant of Morocco, so they tend to be made of just tougher stuff in general. But really what makes his fights in general brutal are, honestly, his powers. Tarn can basically alter folks' genetic makeup, which is exactly what he does to take Storm's powers away after challenging her to a fight, or rather, after insulting her authority as Regent of Morocco, which she interprets basically as a challenge. And honestly, rightfully so. She responds in kind by saying she will see him in the circle for the two of them to duke it out between them for who should sit as regent, or rather, maybe just like who should respect who. Now, when they do, Tarn uses his powers to take away Storm's powers and disfigure her, but still she manages to best him by stabbing him in the chest and threatening to end his life by puncturing his heart. Yeah, Storm, even when she doesn't have powers, she's a really amazing fighter, so you should not mess with her. She forces him to yield, and in the end he learns just how strong-willed Storm is and ultimately returns her powers to her, admitting she is a Viraco and perhaps she might even be of a Menth. That's how intense she is. I was not expecting this next one, which is quite a twist, or rather I wouldn't have been expecting it if I hadn't read it later. 2023 for me was a year of mainly focusing on indie comics in terms of my collection, seeing if I could make it like a whole year without really collecting mainly superhero comics from the big two myself, instead focusing on collecting books from smaller or still large but honestly alternative publishers. Dynamite, Image, IDW, and even still some like really indie like self-published stuff. For the most part, I succeeded in last year's New Year's resolution. Yay, in regards to this, but the downside was I ended up being more behind on my big two superhero stuff, like X-Men. As such, I already kind of knew the events of the Hellfire Gala before I actually read that Hellfire Gala. Even knowing it though, it was still shocking to behold Nimrod flying in and pretty much insta-killing, for the most part, the newly announced X-Men team. Honestly, poor Dazzler. I was so excited about Dazzler joining that team, and then when I heard that that happened, I was like, ugh. And then when I read it, I was like, ah! Contrary to the last point, this one was very unexpected. Obviously with Hellfire Gala, I kind of already knew what happened even though I hadn't read it yet. This one caught me unawares. It's because it was one of the first fights that we saw during the Ten of Swords Otherworld tournament, and I honestly had expectations going into this event that were instantly shattered here. Pardon my pun there. Sorry, Betsy. In this first fight of the tournament, Captain Britain's Betsy Braddock was forced to face off against Arako's champion, Iska the Unbeaten. Iska gets her name from her mutant powers, which prevent her from ever losing. And while I expected that Betsy might be the first one to, pull off such a feat and make Iska lose, since she was the hero in this scenario and Iska, at the time, was the villain, it turns out I was wrong. And true to her name, Iska made short work of Betsy, literally shattering her into thousands of pieces. Yeah, I didn't see that one coming. I feel like wait, what just happened pretty much sums up Ten of Swords as an event. It's just bonkers. Bonkers, I think, in a good way, but that's my opinion. Another battle that I wasn't expecting to go how it did was the one with Uranos versus, well, pretty much all of Viraco, to be honest. But more specifically for this point, I'm talking about the Eternals villain facing off against Magneto, who is of course usually a villain of the X-Men, but in X-Men Red is really more of a hero here. Magneto here seemingly holds his own at first, but in the end has his heart removed by Uranos and is left for dead. It's also a pretty quick fight. It's like brutally quick. It's a seemingly gruesome end for a long-standing character, but what's even more intense is it would shortly after, in the same issue, be revealed that Magneto was so committed to getting revenge here, so willful, that he refused to die, using his powers in place of his heart to move his blood through his body and will himself to keep going so he could live to get revenge on Uranos for what he had done to mutant kind and planet Araco. Heartless Magneto is scary Magneto. This death of a character I'm about to touch upon though is an honest real one. Synch was long dead up until recently in the comics. Thankfully, he was one of the first that the mutant nation of Krakoa brought back, prioritizing his resurrection so that he might be acclimatized and prepared for his mission in the vault alongside Darwin and Laura Kinney's Wolverine. Before his mission there, however, which he miraculously survived, he gave his life to protect others when Emma Frost's school for young mutants was attacked. This was his previous death. Tragic. Generation X, let's go. What makes his death in Generation X even more brutal is the fact that Synch gave his life to basically save other human kids who also attended the school, even though many of the human kids there were pretty unkind to the mutant student body they were forced to share the school with. Another heartbreaking defeat that I found to be extremely shocking and brutal was the loss of Captain Kate Pryde. And Lockheed, poor Lockheed, though fortunately Lockheed, his life was not lost. We must protect Lockheed at all costs. This all went down in the first volume of Marauders, a series that constantly pushed the envelope I felt for what we expect of these characters while also staying true to them. Kate was the leader of this new Marauders team, making her pretty much the main character of the series. So seeing her lost at sea at the hands of Sebastian Shaw was devastating, especially when you consider this happened only in issue 6 of this series. Yeah, just taking everything we thought we knew about what was going on and flipping the script. While a lot of the times we talk about the events of House of M and M-Day as being like the worst things mutants have ever lived through, there was a moment that was even more a brutal brutal loss for Marvel mutants in comparison, I'd wager. One that also cost millions of lives. Millions of lives. I think actually M-Day only cost million, and not even lives, just depowering individuals. But in this case, these people were wiped off the face of the earth. Cassandra Nova returned to get her revenge and ended up killing Donald Trask III in one of the most disturbing ways I've ever seen in a comic, while also merging with him, able to use his voice after his death to command the Master Mold and Sentinels. During the E is for Extinction story, Nova unleashed these Sentinels on Genosha, resulting in what we refer to today as the Genoshan Massacre, which cost mutant kind an estimated 16 million lives. Yeah. Doing far more damage than M-Day and making M-Day even more devastating as a result when it did happen, since the mutants' numbers were already severely reduced going into the House of M event because of course, the Genoshan Massacre. Like, if the Genoshan Massacre hadn't have happened, we would have had more mutants even after M-Day because there'd just be more people in general. So even though many of them would have been depowered, we still would have had a lot left. Number 10, Civil War I. Oh boy, the first Civil War caused a great uproar and a good deal of problems in the superhero community. It also made Earth vulnerable to attack, as it evidently involved just infighting. When superheroes turn on each other, that's bad. When two main superheroes who are part of the same team turn on each other, that's ridiculous. And that's exactly what happened with Civil War I. While the inciting incident that divided heroes wasn't caused by Iron Man or Captain America, and actually was pretty serious, they both had become leaders of two different approaches for how to best resolve that main issue. Iron Man believed that superhuman beings needed a shorter and tighter leash basically, and should work with the government so they could kind of be overseen. Number 9, Axis. Axis was an event where we saw heroes and villains sort of do kind of like a role reversal. This happened as a result of a spell backfiring, cast by, well, you probably guessed it, none other than Scarlet Witch. Wanda, for being a powerful magic user, has kind of a challenging time with magic. Although, to be fair, she actually wasn't the only caster involved here, although she is the one that we often talk about. Doctor Strange started casting with her, and when he got taken out, Doctor Doom actually helped in his stead. So Doom is also possibly to blame as well, even though Wanda usually takes a lot of the flack for this one. What launched the Axis event was Wanda and Doom attempting to cast a spell on the evolved and supremely powerful version of Red Skull, Red Onslaught, which sort of came about when Magneto was like, I know how to fix this, I'll kill you, and then Red Onslaught happened, so it didn't work out so great. The spell actually succeeded, but kind of backfired in that many other heroes and villains within a certain radius also got hit with the spell unintentionally. Oops. And friends, if you are loving what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, may I recommend that you check out our latest channel, Most Amazing Top 10 Anime. Number 8, Hydra Cap. Hydra Cap is definitely a pretty bad thing that happened for the Avengers in, well, in many regards. One, Hydra Captain America is literally another version of Captain America who for a while we actually thought was the main continuity version for real. So we're not off to a great start with that. Number 2, the Avengers failed to stop Hydra Supreme Cap from taking over the US. Number 3, some of the Avengers were even manipulated into joining Hydra and Hydra Cap's forces. Some of them were actually like possessed, and some of them were just kind of made to do so. All around, it was just a rough time and not a great look for the Avengers overall. I'm actually surprised there isn't more pushback from the public today as a result of this one. Number 7, Iron Man joins Kang. Yeesh, the crossing. What a weird crossover event. Every time I think I'm over it, we come up with a list topic where I kind of can't help but like return to it. In this event, Iron Man, one of the main Avengers, was revealed to be secretly one of the baddest of the bad, as we learned that Iron Man had actually been working for Kang, or rather Kang's Immortus version, for years. That's right, it turns out that Iron Man is actually a sleeper agent for Kang, or he was. He kind of still is, because he kind of got reconciled into one being, but it's still the old Iron Man. Anyways, as weird as it sounds, this was actually an even worse weirdness than Captain America working for Hydra in my mind. At least that made more sense to me. Iron Man would fight against the Avengers, and when they struggled to defeat him, they called in a past version of himself for him to beat and almost kill. Number 6, Final Fight. When the Earth was threatened by incursions during the events of Time Runs Out, what did the Avengers do? Save the day? Try to stop those incursions? Not exactly. Captain America had once been a member of the Illuminati, the secret group of heroes who banded together to resolve ideally all of Earth's problems without anyone actually even knowing. A group of superpowered intellectual, philosophical, and moral geniuses. At least That's what they thought. When the incursions were discovered to be a threat, and the majority of the group felt that it was important to consider the possibility that they'd maybe need to destroy other worlds to sort of save themselves from it, Captain America fought vehemently against that idea. As such, his mind was wiped and he was decidedly ejected from the group. When he regained his memories, rather than use the Avengers to fight against the incursions and find a way to stop them, he actually spent the last bit of time before the multiverse was to end hunting down the Illuminati and in a toe-to-toe battle with Iron Man. Number 5. Create the Illuminati. Sometimes it only takes one Avenger to mess up everything for all of us. And that's kind of what happened when Tony Stark, aka Iron Man of the Avengers, decided to bring together the secret superhero group known as the Illuminati. Like I said, this wasn't the combined effort of the Avengers, but when you think about the Avengers now and even before, Tony has been a staple of that team for a very long time. And the Illuminati was really his genius idea. His genius idea. The Illuminati as a group have definitely caused more trouble than they're worth, causing a lot more problems in the cosmos than they've actually solved. Playing a key role in the end of the multiverse during Time Runs Out when they couldn't save the world, helping to cause Secret Invasion and World War Hulk as well. So yeah. Number 4. Civil War II. Even worse by far than Civil War I was its follow-up, Civil War II. In this story, we got more infighting, but for less logical reasons. This time, it was Iron Man versus Captain Marvel, because I guess Iron Man just really needs to like duke it out with all the captains. This one is one we can also likely more blame on the behind the scenes, as Marvel was definitely aiming to capitalize on Civil War I's success with this follow-up, but it just didn't work out too well because Civil War II didn't really make a lot of sense for most readers. But in terms of the canon, Carol, I think, was hands down to blame here for just being, well, unreasonably aggressive on the matter that was up for debate. Whether or not to let Inhuman Ulysses, a precog, predict the future and then based on those predictions stop future criminals from committing future crimes before of course they even happen. Yeah, and I say that as a Captain Marvel fan. I'm a big Carol Danvers fan, but this one was pretty one-sided in my mind. Even I am like, I think Carol was wrong and Tony was right. And I don't say that very often. Number 3. Avengers Disassembled. Avengers Disassembled was a story arc where the Avengers essentially imploded. What had really happened was Wanda had learned of the secret being kept from her, that she'd had fake children, which she'd in essence kinda made, who had been taken from her and then wiped from her mind by Agatha Harkness. Now, Wanda didn't like that too much, and in essence turned against Agatha, killing her before turning on her friends and colleagues, causing them to lose control, attack one another, and sicking reality warped versions basically of like Vision and Dead Avengers on them. Not only did the Avengers hurt one another, but they were made to do so by one of their own, and likely were even somewhat responsible for Wanda getting to a point where she decided to turn on them. So really, who's to blame here? Is it Wanda or is it the Avengers? Or is it kind of everybody? Number 2. Ignoring Scarlet Witch. Avengers Disassembled was bad, but likely what was worse was that it kind of could all have been avoided if the rest of the team had simply, I don't know, cared more about their teammate and friend, Wanda. Scarlet Witch had a lot happen to her, and although this is of course superhero comics where every day that you're alive there's a threat of trauma or, you know, of the world ending, or both, there had been many signs that Wanda was not in a good place. Rather than do something about it or, you know, attempt to, I don't know, get her help, mainly the Avengers just went on as though everything was fine. I mean, I know they all each have a lot individually going on, but come on guys, if you have someone with reality warping powers on your team and they are using those powers to create fake children which then disappear without a trace after they also lose their life partner thanks to them basically being taken apart, mind wiped, and rebuilt as a blank slate without emotion, you might think to offer them some help, or, you know, at least check in to see like if they need anything, if they need a hug or a conversation. I'm not blaming them for what Wanda did, but I would at least like to hold them accountable for being pretty much awful friends to her in her time of need. Number 1. No more mutants. Probably one of the worst things that at least one of the Avengers did was to threaten all of the mutant kind's existence with just, you know, a few words. Although admittedly, this wasn't so much Wanda's fault as it was Marvel's, who of course needed some reason to get rid of mutants for a bit because, you know, they'd sold the rights away and they weren't really profiting as much from comics involving mutants at that time, and they simply had too many of them. But reasoning behind the story aside, during House of M, Wanda in the end struck out at all mutants because her father, she felt, was more obsessed with fighting for mutant rights than he was with his actual own flesh and blood family. Although we'd later learn that Scarlet Witch and her brother Quicksilver weren't even really like flesh and blood family. To begin with, part of the reason that Wanda suffered the mental break, which caused House of M and later M-Day, had to do with the fact that her friends in Avengers didn't seem to notice or perhaps care that Wanda was suffering as a result of losing her children. And in fact, let us not forget that Janet Van Dyne, the Wasp, of the Avengers, was also the one who even kind of like caused Wanda to remember her kids to begin with. She kind of spilled those beans. So whose fault was M-Day really in the end? It was still Wanda's. Wanda was the one that said the words, so it's still her fault. But Janet was there.
Number 10, Forearm. This villain was a member of the Mutant Liberation Front who frequently came up against members of the New Mutants and X-Force, as well as occasionally the X-Men. Although many of the other members of this team vary from appearance to appearance, Forearm is a mainstay of the group. So, what can he do? Well, he has some increased durability, strength, and stamina, but as the name would suggest, his main ability is that he has 4 arms. He eventually left the Mutant Liberation Front once he discovered that his fellow teammate and girlfriend Moonstone was really an undercover SHIELD agent. He was seen participating in the Bloodsport Championship, where he was killed by a member of the Serpent Society named Anaconda. But he later appeared alive and well with no explanation as a new member of a New Mutant Liberation team before eventually being welcomed to the New Mutant island of Koa and later joining S.W.O.R.D. and Magic's Dark Riders.
Number 9, Mr. Sinister. It feels strange putting Mr. Sinister so low on this list, considering how truly unbelievable he is. I mean, just look at him. And then go back and look at his first appearance. Remember when Sinister had sharp teeth? That was a time. Mr. Sinister has always been an unbelievable villain, not just because of his striking and unusual appearance, but because of his obsession with the Summers family, particularly Scott. And later because of his long-standing involvement with both the Summers and the Greys, as well as an origin that attached him to them when they traveled to the past, as well as an origin that tied him to Apocalypse. And now it's gotten even more unbelievable, with Mr. Sinister not just being one, but possibly existing as 4 separate entities, each belonging to their own unique race. Like, what is even happening with this man? He's crazy. At least no matter how unbelievable he continues to get, he will always look fabulous while doing it. That is something that I think in the comics is a guarantee. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not click that subscribe button? We know a lot of you are not subscribed, and you know what? Every time you click that subscribe button, a host gets their wings. So if you click it, maybe I'll just randomly start sprouting wings. Might not be on camera, but it'll happen eventually.
Number 8, Skinless Man. One of the more visually repellent villains on this list, Skinless Man was originally Harry Pizer, a mutant during the Cold War with elastic and multisensory skin, which allowed him to be an efficient spy and member of the Weapon Plus program. They augmented his strength and made his skin more durable and elastic and gave him the name Weapon 3. He was sent to obtain a weapon called the Orb of Necromancy, but was shot and left for dead by Phantomex and captured by the Captain Britain Corps, who removed his skin. Phantomex later stole his skin to create bullets that were sentient and therefore never missed. Pizer taught his muscle to imitate the powers his skin had had and became a villain, being recruited to the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. He typically fights X-Force rather than the X-Men, but honestly, potato potato. He is pretty unbelievable just because, I mean, look at him. What the hell? He eventually died in Uncanny X-Force number 34.
Number 7, Cassandra Nova. Cassandra Nova is one of the strangest, but also maybe in a weird twist, greatest X-Men villains ever. She is the evil twin of Professor Xavier that we never knew existed originally. But really, she isn't like a straight up evil twin. She is what's known as a Mumadrai, which is an evil reflection of ourselves. The alien race known as the Shi'ar believe we must fight and defeat our Mumadrai in order to be born successfully into the world. Yeah, it's a pretty wild concept. And also a weird one to apply to an Earthling like Xavier or even other people on Earth, considering, you know, this is a Shi'ar belief and ultimately a kind of a Shi'ar thing. But who says that Shi'ar's beliefs can't be true for other planets or Earthlings, I guess? Especially when Xavier would grow up to have such close ties to the Empire, even at one time becoming the consort of Lilandra Naramani, the ruler and magistrix of the Shi'ar Empire. And it gets even weirder. Not only did Professor X defeat Cassandra in the womb before being born, meaning his X gene was activated in utero, but she also somehow survived this encounter, likely thanks to the strength of the man that she was a doppel of. Cassandra survived for years as basically kinda like a puddle of goo, and would eventually return. And she's still around now, having been cured of her hatred towards mutants and even teaming up with the Mutant Marauders hero team on Krakoa in the modern day, which also is super weird, but I love it.
Number 6. Mojo. So, Mojo is a member of a race called the Spineless, who can't move without the help of motorized platforms. They were all driven insane by waves of energy that turned out to be television signals. Their government is based on the structure of the television industry, and Mojo is its leader, calling the world Mojo World and their universe the Mojoverse. Everyone on Mojo World is addicted to a gladiator-like sports show, and Mojo does everything he can to keep the ratings up. Some of his more infamous plots were when he replaced Psylocke's eyes with cameras so he could broadcast everything she saw to his people, or when he transformed the X-Men into children and later cloned them and made the X-Babies, who he hoped he could control. Honestly, every sentence about this guy makes less sense than the last, and his entire deal seems to be just really broad and surface level criticism of the entertainment industry, so I'm just gonna move on now.
Number 5. Lucifer. Lucifer has always been a really weird one for me from the comics, another enemy to Professor Charles Xavier. This nemesis was originally attributed with paralyzing Charles, forcing him to be confined to a wheelchair. Initially, it was implied through mysterious illusions that Lucifer may actually be Satan himself. This was when Charles left the X-Men team in the care of Cyclops when he went on his own mission. Xavier did this following the students' graduation from his school, believing they were ready to be left on their own when it came to heroics, leaving Cyclops in charge. When Cyclops did reach out to him during his mission, Charles answered, as we saw in the comics, from a dark, kind of fiery looking cavern that he seemed to be lowering himself further into. There wasn't actual fire in these panels, I don't think, but definitely I feel like there was some red lighting happening. Also, the fact that the character's name was Lucifer, who Charles was in pursuit of. However, we later learned that Lucifer was not in fact Satan incarnate, but instead an alien trying to help his race conquer the Earth? Huh?
Number 4. Mammomax. Maximus Jensen's mutation is very off and kind of vague. He is a man who was either born or transformed into an elephant man. He has big tusks which he uses to attack his foes, has the strength of an elephant, which I guess kinda goes without saying, and has nearly invulnerable skin. Like all elephants, he has the ability to spit acid at people as well. What's that? Elephants don't do that? Well then, that's kind of a random ability for him to have, isn't it? He was a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, joining because he thought he'd get to hang out with tough Magneto-trained mutants. He was disappointed with the roster he got stuck with, and was presumably even more disappointed when he and the Brotherhood got stranded in Mojo World. He was eventually captured by the Facility, where he was eaten by a monster, but he was later resurrected by the Five in Krakoa. Now, I have no issue with an elephant villain, but the idea of someone being mutated to just be an elephant is pretty unbelievable, even for the X-Men.
Number 3. Moira McTaggart. Possibly one of the most shocking villains on our list is Moira McTaggart. Moira isn't unbelievable in the sense of being ridiculous or being weird, she is more shocking in the fact of her actual allegiances and origins, which have recently been revealed. For years, Moira has been established as a friend of the X-Men, a human ally who believes that mutants deserve equal rights. But we would later learn the truth, that Moira herself is actually a mutant. And then we'd later learn again that despite her actually also being a mutant, which you'd think would make her more allied with the X-Men, she is no longer an ally to the X-Men, but one of their #1 enemies. What? Moira would even join up with the deadly and influential organization known as Orchis, which aims to put an end to mutants in an effort to preserve and safeguard humanity. Moira herself has kind of been stripped of her mutant genes and powers and turned into a bit of a cyborg, but this hasn't stopped her from continuing in her fight against mutant kind, in a shocking comic book twist.
Number 2. Nimrod. Nimrod here comes from the Days of Future Past alternate future, where mutant hunting sentinels controlled North America. He is an advanced prototype of the program who tried to follow Rachel Summers into the past after her and Kate Pryde were discovered during a sabotage mission. He ended up undershooting his destination by about 20 years, where he killed Storm and forced Forge to build him a time machine, which took him to the current Marvel timeline, where he came into contact with and fought the X-Men on several occasions, eventually merging with the remains of of the Master Mold and becoming Bastion. What I find so unbelievable about the character is that anyone would be scared of someone called Nimrod. In case you are not aware, Nimrod was the name of a legendary and skilled hunter from the Bible, so it is obviously implying that this Nimrod is designed to hunt mutants really efficiently. However, because Bugs Bunny would often sarcastically refer to Elmer Fudd as Nimrod in the old Looney Tunes cartoons, its meaning evolved in the general lexicon to mean an idiot. So as unbelievable as it sounds, a cartoon bunny has made me incapable of viewing this villain as threatening because to the general public, he is calling himself an idiot.
Number 1. Ice Cream. Ice Cream has to be one of the weirdest mutant villains of all time, considering that his plan was to basically use his mutant power to turn into ice cream and then infiltrate the X-Men, and I guess I'm not really sure what his plan was here. He basically wanted revenge on the X-Men because he was jealous of how amazing their abilities were in comparison to his own. So I don't know how he thought he was gonna do that because he's just a guy that could turn into ice cream, but yeah. Ice Cream was a very short-lived villain, not appearing specifically in X-Men but simply as a villain to the team in issue number 1 of Obnoxio the Clown, which in all regards is also an extremely unbelievable comic that happened. In the end, his plan failed dramatically and he got eaten by the clown who had been hired to come and celebrate Kitty Pryde's birthday. This is a strange time for everyone, but I imagine it was especially a strange time for Ice Cream. Also, I don't think he turns into a full ice cream. He also turns into a sundae, which, how is that? Is that part of it? Is he the banana as well? I am the banana.
X had become the Juggernaut. From What If issue 13 volume 2, here we have a story in which Charles Xavier becomes the Juggernaut. It's a simple answer to what would happen. Xavier ends up getting buried alive. But the consequences are much greater. Because of this, he's never able to create the X-Men, leaving the Fantastic Four responsible for taking on Magneto. It gets worse, snowballing into some major anti-mutant hysteria. Eventually Xavier manages to dig himself out of the ground, but it's too late for him to try to change the world for the better. He ends up using his super strength combined with his powerful psychic abilities to take over the US and enforce anti-human laws, using the X-Men to do so. In the process, he ends up defeating a lot of major Marvel characters including the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Doctor Doom, Iron Man, Daredevil, and even the Hulk. Russia then tries to bomb the US, which is the catalyst for World War III. Xavier steps up, finding a way to make the Earth livable despite all of the damage from the bomb, and ends up becoming the supreme leader of the planet. His only ask? That mutants aren't treated like crap. More mutants are born thanks to the bomb radiation, making up almost half of the planet's population. But despite the world finding some sort of peace, Xavier has gone mad, and in secret the remaining heroes and superpowered characters plot his demise, no longer believing in his dream since mutants now openly terrorize humans. This leads to a clash between Xavier and several of the X-Men on Asteroid M, with Quicksilver using explosives to launch Xavier into space, a potentially temporary solution that leaves Cyclops, Jean Grey, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver with the responsibility of trying to repair the world in the meantime. Talk about a hefty storyline. And at number 9, what if Wolverine had lived during the age of Conan the Barbarian? Conan the Barbarian has made many an appearance in What If comics over the years. In this story though, which appears in What If Volume 2 issue 16, Wolverine is transported to another time. Within the first few panels, he slays a T-Rex, impressing the locals. He finds himself completely immersing himself in the culture, getting a new outfit, and not understanding a damn word that anyone is saying. Eventually he crosses paths with Conan, a battle ensues, and Conan slits Wolverine's throat. Thinking he's killed him, he walks away, but little does he know that Wolverine has a mutant healing factor. He pursues him, more shenanigans ensue, and Wolverine ends up staying in Conan's world, with Conan being teleported back out to where the X-Men are battling on the moon. And he also ends up with Sonya, who looks just like Jean Grey apparently. Oh, redheads. And at number 8, What If? X-Men Wedding Album. Issue 60 from Volume 2 of the What If series explored a specific theme. It contains a slew of stories related to Cyclops and Jean Grey's relationship, exploring different facets and possibilities. There's What If Scott Summers and Jean Grey had married earlier, which sees the couple marrying earlier on during the beginnings of the mutant team. Another one is What If Scott Summers and Jean Grey had never fallen in love at all, which results in Cyclops leaving the X-Men team altogether. Then there's What If Phoenix had fallen for Wolverine, perhaps the most tragic tale of them all, which involves the X-Men disbanding, ultimately thanks to the fact that all of the characters die. The framing for the entire issue revolves around the mainstream Earth 616 continuity of Jean and Scott, particularly pertaining to X-Men Volume 2 issue 30, in which the two have their wedding. And at 7, What If Cable had destroyed the X-Men? This one comes from What If Volume 2 issue 46, which was released released in 1993. Its narrative follows Charles Xavier returning to Earth after being on a hiatus, only to discover that his X-Men teams have all strayed significantly. He holds meetings with each of the teams only to get into a fight with Cable in which a battle ensues. Some side with Xavier while others side with Cable, and Cable ends up fleeing. Later on, he assassinates Xavier along with Jean Grey and Scott Summers, killing them when they least expect it by launching a siren bomb at their dinner table. This causes a major disturbance between the members of all the X teams, dividing them, causing them to fight amongst themselves. In the meantime, the teams outside of the mutant-based ones are forced to pick up the slack. The Avengers and Fantastic Four are fighting off typical X-Men villains since the X-Men are too busy beating each other up instead. There's a massive fight and Wolverine's team of mutants clashes with Cable's team, killing Cable and his pals. Everything kind of falls apart there, with Magneto swooping in to try to get the remaining members of these battle-worn teams to join up with him. And talk about being an opportunist. Can you blame him though? And at 6, what if Wolverine was an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D.? This one might be my personal favorite. From What If Volume 2 Issue 7, first released in 1989, here we have Wolverine, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. The timeline diverges from the 616 timeline after Wolverine encounters the Wendigo with the Hulk. After that battle, he goes on loan to S.H.I.E.L.D. for a single mission to help them retrieve a stolen LMD tech. Hydra, of course, is the culprit behind the theft. Nick Fury and Wolverine hunt down the LMD robots and destroy them, one of which includes a decoy of Dum Dum Dugan. Upset about this revelation, Fury sends Wolverine and Black Widow to hunt down any other LMDs possibly infiltrating S.H.I.E.L.D. Turns out half of the crew on board of their ship were robots. The trio then set out to hit Hydra's base and rescue the real Dum Dum, which has them crossing paths with Madame Hydra and Baron von Strucker, who is in possession of the Satan Claw. A brawl ensues, with S.H.I.E.L.D. being victorious. Fury then offers Wolverine a spot permanently on the team, and Logan, wanting a change of pace, agrees. It's around this time on 616 that he'd be joining up with the X-Men anyway. Logan rises in the ranks, becoming Fury's number 2, and later on, Fury is murdered by a Strucker LMD seeking revenge, who takes him out in his flying Ferrari nonetheless. Gotta love the 80s. At Fury's funeral, Dum Dum retires, which makes Logan the new director of S.H.I.E.L.D. This has a powerful domino effect on the world. Using S.H.I.E.L.D., Wolverine prevents several major events in the Marvel Universe, including the creation of Sentinels, Dark Phoenix's emergence, there's no Mutant Registration Act, and overall, it improves human and mutant relations for the better. Kind of hurts to see the potential Logan had at S.H.I.E.L.D., doesn't it? But on a different note, fun fact, another story in this issue is what if Aunt May was a mutant with claws? So I guess, that's one hell of a reminder that this is a what if issue. In at number 5, what if the X-Men had stayed in Asgard? Based on the comic New Mutants Special Edition issue 1, What If the X-Men Had Stayed in Asgard is a riff off of a story in which concluded with them leaving Asgard to return to Earth. The premise is very self-explanatory here. The X-Men all vote, and those who wish to leave are sent home by Loki. The rest of the story follows the lives of these remaining X-Men and how they assimilate into Asgardian culture. Rogue finds love, being able to touch the Asgardian people. Mirage becomes a Valkyrie. Storm becomes the goddess of thunder, and Loki attempts to trick her into slaying his brother, who has been transformed into a frog. Hela then attacks Asgard, and the X-Men alongside Thor, who is eventually transformed back to his normal self, fight her and her army. They defeat her and Thor returns to Earth, giving Storm the throne and Asgard to rule. And Loki? Well, for the tricks that he played in getting the X-Men to stay, he slowly goes mad by the end of the comic, thanks to the ones who sit above in shadow. Moving on to number 4, what if the new X-Men had died on their very first mission? Coming out of What If Volume 2 Issue 9, this comic book has a wonderful cover. It's Charles Xavier being pushed away from the X-Men's funeral by Beast, shouting out up into the heavens, "The X-Men are dead and I killed them!" The concept for this one places the original X-Men and the new X-Men being killed off on their mission, with Xavier telepathically feeling each and every one of their deaths. Beast, the only X-Men member to not have gone on this mission, tries to console the depressed Xavier. Count Nefaria sees how weakened the X-Men are and attacks, which forces Beast into forming a new ragtag team that consists of himself, Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, Siren, Warpath, and Namorita, the female version of Namor. This new team end up fighting and defeating Count Nefaria, and Xavier, seeing this new team all put together, begins to come out of his depression, asking the new team to stay on and become official X-Men. All works out for the best. Except, all of the original ones are dead, but hey. Moving on to number 3, what if Wolverine had killed the Hulk? From What If Volume 1 Issue 13, we see a rehashing of Wolverine's first appearance in the comics, when he first crossed paths with the Hulk in the Incredible Hulk issue 181. Although he technically made a cameo in the issue prior, but cameo. It was like in a panel. Now in that story, Wolverine and the Hulk initially see each other as a threat before teaming up together to take down the Wendigo. But in this story though, Wolverine and the Hulk duke it out. And rather than being interrupted by the Wendigo, which initially causes them to stop fighting each other, the Wendigo never shows up. This ends up resulting in Wolverine fatally wounding the Hulk, and leads to him fleeing from authorities despite his attacks being out of self-defense. Because he's on the run, he doesn't join the X-Men. Instead, he teams up with Magneto and joins the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. With his his first assignment being to infiltrate the X-Men. He does, but in the process grows close to the mutant team, and when the time comes for him to double-cross them, he just can't do it. Instead, he turns on Magneto, and Magneto and Wolverine fights, with them killing each other in the process. And at number 2, what if Wolverine was Lord of the Vampires? This one's great. Here's a what if story that should be familiar to some of you who frequent our channel. From What If Volume 2, Issue 24, What If Wolverine was Lord of the Vampires? Tells the tale of Wolverine and the X-Men crossing paths with none other than Count Dracula. The two fight, and Wolverine gets bitten, becoming a vampire himself. But, thanks to his willpower, he's able to evade Dracula's mind control abilities, and ends up fighting him for dominance. Wolverine succeeds and kills him, and then proceeds to transform all of the other X-Men into vampires, with him and his new army going around biting beloved heroes and draining them of their blood. Eventually, for some reason that I swear totally makes sense, Doctor Strange has taken over the body of the Punisher and goes after Wolverine, and manages to get through to Logan in the end, stopping his blood reign of terror. And finally, and at number 1, what if Phoenix had not died? From What If, Issue 27, Volume 1, we see the Watcher looking into an alternate reality in which Jean Grey did not die during the incursion with the Shi'ar. Rather, she was reborn. And when the X-Men find themselves facing off against Galactus and Terrax in the Shi'ar galaxy, the Phoenix rises and kicks some serious butt, stopping Galactus. But something is not right. Jean Grey is overwhelmed by the Phoenix Force and ends up losing control, destroying a star. Once back home on Earth at the X-Mansion, Kitty Pryde confronts Jean about the star that she destroyed. This does not bode well. Jean loses it and becomes Dark Phoenix, killing Kitty in response. The X-Men attempt to stop her, but her rampage continues. She ends up killing Polaris. Cyclops tries to intervene too, but Phoenix murders him as well. And it only gets worse from there. Jean entirely loses control and the Phoenix Force engulfs the entire world, destroying it, with it continuing to expand in the universe, consuming it all bit by bit. Talk about depressing.